Story 1. Lake Erie Cryptozoology. The study of organic life whose existence has not yet been proven. Gibraltar Island, 2007. To men had planned a diving trip into Lake Erie to study the effects of the pollution on the walleye and common carp in the area. These fish were the biggest product for freshwater commercial fishermen, and the Department of Health had given them this assignment. Dr. Clive Brown and Christopher Trudeau had started their dive off the northern docks on Gibraltar Island, located in the southwestern section of Lake Erie. The dive was scheduled to last an hour, but the police dispatched a rescue boat after the men had been missing for 5 hours. After an extensive search, they found Dr. Clive Brown floating. Face up, he was still alive when they pulled him onto the boat to cut his diving suit and mask from him and began to administer CPR. Dr. Brown violently regained consciousness, spitting water and seizing. He grabbed the first medic he could and began screaming that his partner was dead and to get the boat off the lake. He wouldn't stop screaming until the boat reached dry land. They took him to the closest hospital on the mainland in Ohio, and police began to question him. When he was able to stay awake, they asked him what happened and where his partner was. He couldn't stave off the shock very long. He would slip in and out of consciousness and had a hard time speaking about the events that occurred at the bottom on Lake Erie. The investigators tried to charge him with murder and withholding evidence, but nothing stuck. Without any remains of Mr. Trudeau, they didn't have sufficient proof that it wasn't anything more than a simple drowning. Dr. Brown would not speak of the incident. 2013, 6 years after the disappearance of Christopher Trudeau, an article appeared in a supermarket tabloid. The magazine was never meant to be taken seriously. This was the kind of reading material that claimed aliens were at the crucifixion of Christ, or a 2,000-year-old batbo was found in the Middle East. The only reason the article caught my attention as the author's name, Clive Brown. The article was about the two colleges' dive into Lake Erie and what happened down there. After reading the heavily edited garbage, I decided to track him down and speak to the man myself, the horse's mouth and all that. I finally tracked down Dr. Clive Brown and asked him to speak on these events. He reluctantly agreed after a very long plea and a hefty fee considering my salary. The following is his. It borders Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, and Canada. It has had a pollution problem since the 1970s because of all the factories and mills that are placed close to the lake, releasing record levels of pollution. On some days the pollution gets so bad, people have reported seeing a mirror sheen on the lake's surface along with a mixture of discolored algae and dead fish. The tests were going fine. We had collected all the samples we needed and even had time to catch the scenery. Everyone says Lake Erie is nasty, full of pollution, but man, when you are down near the bottom, it's as beautiful as the Caribbean. We were about to finish when I thought I had my ankle wrapped in seaweed. I pulled a knife from a sheath on my hip to cut the weed when I noticed through the fog my breath had created in my dive mask. My partner was violently flailing. I saw what looked like light pink ropes with the thickness of a human leg wrapped around Christopher's legs and neck. He was trying to free his neck when the bonds began to slowly pull him down. I looked at my ankle and saw that it wasn't seaweed that 500 taken hold of me. It was the same light pink rope-like thing that had ensnared my partner. I slashed at it with my knife over and over, as hard as I could. Consider the resistance of being underwater until the elastic rope snapped. Blood spewed into the water from the sliced pieces, and I heard this deep groan underneath me. Now look, there are some things in this world that will make people shit their pants just thinking about it. And I'm telling you, that sound is something that will haunt me forever. The groan echoed through the water. Almost like sonar, I could see my partner still being dragged down by 3 different pink ropes. The further down they dragged him, the greater the angle between the ropes became. And then they stopped. I swam down against the pressure as hard as I could to save my long-time colleague and friend. When I reached Christopher, I pulled out my knife with the purpose of freeing him, but it seemed neither of us could stop panicking. Christoph, hers entire body was thrashing with fear, and I had far from steady hands. The ropes were at an impasse. Each one wanted to pull him in its own direction. They let Christopher hang there. A moment he was thrashing and flailing like a toddler, throwing a fit, still attempting to free himself. He abruptly stopped moving. It was like he had just figured out how screwed he was. Time stopped, and I just stared at Christopher's face through my dive mask. His eyes were slowly widening. I could hear my heart beat, and the world was still. After what had seemed like a lifetime had passed, the soft pink ropes pulled the body part that it was attached to in a separate direction. One took Christopher's left leg, another took his right leg, groin and midsection, and the third one took his damn head, chest, and arms. There was so much blood, it was like a squid had spewed red ink right in front of me. I remember after it was all done, thinking of how quickly I accepted that Chris was dead, and just wondering what the hell I was going to do next. He pulled a pack of cigarettes out of his shirt's front pocket, lit one, took a puff, and looked down to T. He floored for a moment. I never really cried over his death. I never even made it to his funeral. Every time I think about what happened, I just get so afraid that I can't. ... double quotes. He paused, T for a moment, and then continued. I had underwater flares for lighting, and pulled one out of my equipment bag. I struck the flare and dropped it. It sank down and lit up a section of the lake bed. I swear to God, from the time that flare left my hand and fell to the bottom of that lake, my life has never changed more drastically. I saw 4 of them, large, dark, green, and brown-colored figures. They were frogs. There were 4 frogs the size of goddamn box trucks, sitting at the bottom of the lake, with Christopher's limbs still hanging out of 3 of their mouths. They chewed on him, staring at me the entire time, like they just wanted to swallow so they could come after me. Their eyes were fixated on me. I was lost in a trance. It was like a dream. I knew I had to get away, but it was like my brain couldn't send the proper signals to my muscles to move. Then I heard it again, that deep, echoing, chest-rumbling groan. The neck of the only one who wasn't eating inflated. It looked like a freaking hot air balloon. Then it was like someone in my mind screamed at me, "Move, you idiot." I started to swim to the top of the water as fast as I could. Another deep groan echoed from underneath. Emmy, I had considered if it was a reaction to the pain I had caused one of the creatures with my blade, or for the rage it was expressing as its prey was escaping. It didn't matter. A fly I had been reduced to nothing more than the equivalent of a simple house fly. I was feeling true and absolute helplessness. One of the tongues grabbed my oxygen tank and knocked the hoses loose. I lost consciousness soon after due to either the sudden pressure change or the reality of what I had just seen. I wasn't sure. You know the rest. By some miracle they found me. I was half dead and everyone assumed I was absolutely insane. You know how they say, when a veteran who's seen combat will come home and freak out over a loud noise, like a window being shut too hard or something like that. Post-traumatic stress disorder. Exactly. PTSD is the only souvenir I got from that diving trip. Now I am terrified to be submerged in any amount of water. I literally cannot take a bath without having a panic attack. I have to shower with the curtain open. Does this sound like a problem that a normal functioning adult should have? But hey, I'm alive, which is a hell of a low more that anyone can say for Chris, right? Equals 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 equals. I stood up, shook Dr. Brown's hand, and thanked him for his hospitality and testimony. What are you going to do now? He asked. I just want to share your story with anyone willing to listen. I told him. Good, I just hope this doesn't end up in another one of those god-awful supermarket tabloids, he said. I smiled, shook his hand again, and we parted ways. Story 2. Forest of Suicides. His room was quaint, containing quarters to sleep, a kitchenette and facilities. Simple, yet exceedingly modern. His room mirrored his personality near perfectly. Simple, open, and inviting, it was the home of Tokiro Mitsuko. He sat on the foot of his bed and leaned back, remembering the events of the past several days. Tokiro Mitsuko had never been a drawing man. The large pool of intelligence he controlled was overshadowed by his lack of dreams and ambition. He had never been fond of chasing after girls, never had many friends, and never said much. He was entirely neutral. His only goal was to live his life until its inexorable end. He had not attended a university, nor had he tried to gain any truly marketable skills. He lived quietly and simply, politely denying others from entering his sphere of influence. He even worked simply as a park staffer. The forest to which he was delegated, however, was anything but average. It was a Okigahara, the forest of suicides. Lying at the base of Mount Fuji, the forest was exceedingly quiet, devoid of wildlife, and dotted by ice caves and caverns. The forest had strong ties to demons in Japanese folklore. Every year, over 100 troubled souls enter the forest, only to take their own lives. Each year, the park staff must enter the forest to clear the human remains, tally the dead, identify which corpses they can, and check for items that may be important to living parties related to the deceased, such as suicide notes. Tokiro Mitsuko has been employed with the park for 12 years. This year was no different. He arrived just after dawn at the edge of the forest. Exiting his vehicle, he attached the harness many employees put on when entering the forest to the front grille of his vehicle. Surrounded by so much death and the quiet of the forest, it was only natural that the living would want a tether that they could count on to not lose touch with reality. The forest was disconcerting. Towering trees stood motionless, with nary the smallest of breezes to move them, and not the smallest of creatures to scurry around. Tokiro walked along, carefully picking his way over bushes and sticks. Not at all concerned with the place he was in, he stopped at a particularly large tree in a clearing. He retrieved the pack from his back end and zipped it. From it he drew a handwritten sign asking poor souls to reconsider and seek help from those who loved them. He slowly and methodically hammered the sign into the ancient bark of the looming tree. He stepped back, satisfied. He breathed in deeply, and the hair on his neck stood on end. He had always felt something akin to closeness in this place. Death had been a near fixation of his. The freedom, he whispered aloud, the absolute tie-in of soul passing from the body. He never really had seen much point in living, but for whatever reason he couldn't see the point of taking one's own life either. Nearly an hour had passed. And the quadrant of the forest he was assigned to had reared next to nothing much to his pleasure. Rounding a small embankment, Tokiro stopped to gaze upon the long dead corpse of a young woman. Her eyes had long since rotted away, but her corpse seemed unusually bloated. Next to her was a small wooden box. Carefully, Tokiro knelt down and opened the box. Inside, he found a suicide note. Skimming through the note, he recounted this woman's story. She had been in her final year of high school when she was raped by her stepfather and framed for being a harlot and a liar. Shunned by her family and pregnant with nowhere to turn, she wandered into the forest before stabbing herself to death. Tokiro noted that the story ended with an apology to her unborn baby girl, whom she had intended to name Arisu. Tokiro slowly stood up, noting a small knife lodged in the woman's abdomen. He looked around, reflecting on the horrendous actions that led this woman to the dark sea that she was unable to recover from. Reciting a small Buddhist prayer, he noted her GPS location and vowed to give her earthly remains closure, as he did with all the deceased he found. He stopped in mid-stride away from the corpse. In his periphery, he saw indentions in the layer of topsoil off to his right. He wandered over to them slowly, observing them. They were small, human feet. They led away from the corpse. As far as Tokiro could tell, not a soul other than he had set foot here in months, and as timeless as the forest scene. This should not be. He stooped over the trail led by the small footprints, noting they almost looked like those of a child. It was at this point that Tokiro began to breathe heavily. He was scared, yes, but intrigued. He started down the trail, following the footprints. His tether had reached its limit. He had 100 meters of rope at his disposal, but it was not enough. He slipped free of the harness and kept walking on. The great gnarled trees had begun to gnaw at his psyche. He became increasingly paranoid and upset with his surroundings. He was too far into the forest for the tape and markings left by thrill seekers to be present, and he soon realized he was unsure where he was. drawing closer to panic. The only logical plan in his mind was to find where the footprints led. A break in the trees appeared ahead of him, and a craggy, icy cave opened up before him, beckoning him into its gaping maw. His radio buzzed loudly, sending him reeling with fear. He regained his composure enough to respond. It was not Sumi, the only woman whom he had close in his life. She informed him that he was late, and his GPS said he was nearly 3 kilometers out of his designated zone. He pressed down the button to reply, inhaled, and stopped. He could think of nothing to say. No words would come to his lips. He wanted to beg for help, to reach out and have contact with something over than the paranoia that had consumed him for hours. But only dead air fed through to Natsume's receiver. He looked deep into the darkness of the cave, feeling himself drawn in. He dropped the radio and his GPS system to the ground and continued into the cave. He was lucky that the cave was rather linear and easily traversable, though he still could not see how Child had made it here. Hours seemingly passed before the cavern led to a large central chamber. Tokiro was shocked by what he saw. Stalagmites protruded from the ground, with dozens of corpses skewered in various stages of decay. He fell to his knees and, wretched, appalled, a faint notion pierced his mind. Something slight and frail, a touch. He looked behind him to see a small girl grasping his ankle. Her hand was barely big enough to get a grip on his ankle, and slighter than brushing against a tree branch. But it held him in place with a grave chill. A small voice permeated his mind. First he thought it to be his own, but behind a small veil he sensed a wave of negative energy. Instinctively he bolted from the grasp of the small girl and ran to the center of the gruesome sculpture. He could sense the tinge of a demonic presence now. Its dark tendril burrowed into his mind, melding his consciousness with darkness. "Let me tell you a story," the voice hissed in his mind. From outside the cavern, Natsumi picked up his fallen radio. She looked around, seeing no footprints but his and no signs of disturbance. Suddenly a shriek assaulted her ears. Startled, she dropped, paid the radio, and sprinted towards the edge of the forest. She locked herself in her small car and panted heavily for several minutes before calling her manager in tears. When she arrived back at the park management building, she was hysterical and inconsolable, utterly terrified. She was sent home with the advice to breathe some fresh air in the city park. Natsumi sat on a bench, waiting for the tram to come by so she could get to work. It had been 3 days since her experience in the forest, and 3 days since she had gotten any decent sleep. The weight of someone sitting down and next to her was enough to rouse her from her fuck. She looked over to see Tokiro Mitsuko sitting next to her, smiling. Before she could say a word, he gently pressed a finger to her lips. "Let me tell you a story, Natsumi," he said, smiling. He leaned back and told her of what he had seen in the cavern, ending his story with the feeling of a dark presence invading his mind. At the conclusion of his tale, he produced the small knife from the corpse of the suicide from under his coat. He thrust the dull, rusty blade into the bottom of her stomach, wrenching the blade upwards until he had cut her entire abdomen open, spilling the contents on the sidewalk. Gasping for air, Natsumi watched as her lifelong friend walked away, whistling. The last image she ever saw being his law, rage, toothy smile, to daze and to publicly disemboweled women later. Tokiro leaned forward from his position as someone he didn't recognize entered the room. The man introduced himself as Detective E2 and asked Tokiro to tell him why he had killed 3 young women. Tokiro briefly struggled against his straitjacket and then leaned in close to the detective. "Let me tell you a story," he whispered, smiling. "Story 3, windows, monsters, fucking monsters. Yeah, I know they aren't real. It's always a dude in a suit or someone playing Joe. Well, that is all bullshit. I saw one and I know it was real, 'cause it saw me too. Might as well start from the beginning. My older brother was a dick, always getting what he wanted and blaming me for the stuff he did wrong. Our dad, only parent we lived with, would believe him instantly. I'm not bitter about it, but it is still a sore spot. I was rather skilled with technology and computers. My brother was more inclined to manual labor and punching people. Though we look almost alike enough to be twins, he is a year older. My father would spend a lot of time out, hitting on women and drinking. Every night he was out, my brother would go to his friend's house a mile or 2 away from our place, since we lived in a small town, just out of range for most cell phones, and a good hour from any police station or civilization other than the post office, general store. We were one of 5 houses in a 4-mile radius down in a valley. If you cannot tell, this is going to be something no one can corroborate anyway. One of those nights when my father was drinking and my brother was off doing something with his friends, I was sleeping on the couch in the living room. I had a hard time sleeping in my room in the basement when home alone. Just some personal issues with small spaces and no windows. This night helped get me over that. The TV was going something stupid on Adult Swim laying, and I woke up to a weird sound from the door. My brother would get drunk or high and wander home around 3 to 4 a.m. Most times he went out, but it was only midnight when I looked over at the clock, thinking he had a fight with his friends or something. I hop up from the couch and tub my pants into place since they were a little too big for me. So I walked, no shirt or socks or anything, to the door and looked through the peephole. Nothing out there. With a shrug, I think it was a dog, and walked back to the couch. The moment I sit down, looking at the TV a moment before, something catches my eye. Outside the window was a rather small shadow, probably the dog that has been pawing at my door. I give a sigh, thinking about how that mutt could take a crap on the porch and I would have to clean it. I walked back to the door, glancing at the window the moment my fingers touched the knob. Every cell in my body locked up, freezing me in place. My skin started shivering. Goosebumps formed on every inch of me as I tried in vain to move my body on will alone. I could not process this thing for a full minute. Long, thin, and slinky, it was not a fucking dog. Scales, instead of fur, covered it, black with some grayed ones here and there. Its tail made up so much of its body that it looked as if it had begun right behind the only 2 limbs it had. Hands, not paws, were at the ends of its arms. But the arms, those fucking arms, were wrong in so many ways. They had what looked like 3 elbows. The arms curved in a few different ways, making it look broke and bent. I could only see those hands because they pressed to the glass of the window along with its face. Yes, a face. human almost, but the thing had no lips, just a slit across the spot above its jaw. The eyes were solid black and the nose was just a bump with one hole toward the bottom. It looked like someone had taken a blank doll and carried a face into it. It was just as still as I was, looking right at me while I held the doorknob. I thought it was some kind of joke, some kind of trick of the light, but the longer I stared at it, the less I could deny it was alive. I could see the fog forming from its nose, the way its body inflated ever so slightly with each breath. My eyes drifted over it, looking at each feature in horror and memorizing it, burning that fucking thing into me, black nails, chipped and broken as if it had been using them to crawl around on. The slightest gap between the top and bottom of that slit across its face. Then I looked at its eyes, those horrid black beads, perfectly round and sticking barely off of its face. I could not tell if it were moving them at all. Then it did the creepiest thing it could have. It smiled, the pale, smooth cheeks creased as its mouth arched, and gave me a hint of the teeth behind it, not full rows of razors like I had somehow expected, but broken human teeth. My lungs were not working now. Tim, he slowed around me as my brain got flooded with energy, but begging me to decide on fight or flight. I hardened my gaze, eyebrows furrowed in anger at this fucking thing, and it just kept smiling. I laughed, teeth the knob go, and slowly gained the ability to stand. Right as soon as I squared my shoulders with that monster, the smile slowly faded from its face, passing all the way to a deep frown. It tapped the window one time with a broken black nail. A shudder ran through me before I could stop it. The beast gave another tap with its finger as that thick, black snake tail coiled around its SELF. I didn't move this time, instead trying to think. Dad's gun would be in the closet, but the shells were in his dresser. I would have to get to them both in seconds if I moved. That THING could come through that window easily. I knew it from the loud sounds of just one finger tapping. Like it could see the wheels in my head turning, it spread those long fingers, raking the black nails inward. Trails of scratches formed with a high-pitched sound, till it made a fist against a glass. Shit, I mirrored its actions. Not sure why, but it seemed to confuse the thing. It spread its and open again, turning it side to side. I copied that too. It raised its hand up, mine followed. It touched its face. I cupped my cheek the same way. Then it twisted its arm into an O shape. Double shit. When I could not copy that movement, it went back to smiling at me, now curling and uncurling its arm as if it were mocking me for my lack of joints. This fucking thing, not only had it caused a fear in me I had never known, but now it was teasing me. This fucking monster freak was acting like it was better than me. Without meaning to or any form of planning, I looked it right in the eye and said, "At least I have legs." It stopped moving its arms and looked right into my eyes, face gone into a blank slate again. Then in the worst, deepest, and most evil voice I could ever imagine, it spoke, "And I have you." Diving backward into my dad's room, I slammed the door shut and ran for the gun. The closet door slid hard to the side, slamming loudly. Blood rushed through my body. My fingers gripped the barrel, and I all but leapt to the dresser. Fishing into it with one hand and pulling 3 shells out, I turned to the door, stuffing them in to the 12 gauge and pointing right at the center of the door. It took me maybe a minute in total once I was in the door, but I was ready. I was going to blow that thing to pieces. I stayed there, holding the gun and waiting for 5 minutes. No broken glass sounds, nothing but silence. Then I whipped around, checking both windows. Nothing again. For hours I stood there, ready to unload all 3 shells into anything that moved. For hours I waited to see those twisted hands reaching for me. Then the front door opened. I turned around, still pointing at the door, when I hear my brother call out, "Hey, you up?" I shakily opened the door, still holding the gun. Nothing in the window, and my older brother popping open a can of soda. He was not drunk or high tonight, just kinda sleepy looking when he said, "Why do you have that?" I explained what I saw, I explained what happened, and I begged him to believe me. He said I was just fucking with him, and went to be me begging him to stay up with me till morning. No dice. So I sat on the couch, shotgun in hand, looking at that same window till my dad got home the next day. He didn't believe me either. I slept in my room, no windows, and only one door all day. And the next night I stayed down there. I couldn't go into that living room again for weeks. My brother actually stayed with me all night showing me there wasn't a damn thing to be afraid of. I don't know what people have told you or even what you believe, but there are things out there. There are things that want you hurt. There are things that can and will tow with you just for the fun of it. My advice: get a gun and a bunker, cause that is as close to safe as I feel most nights. Story 4. Small world. I was walking alone, no one to talk to, and I could care less. My mind has been running wild since the start of this year, which it's now fall, in case you were wondering. And, to be honest, my essay, nitty and personality have lost their roots, and they began to fray. I'd rather be by myself, where for the moment I could possibly find a sanctuary. During quiet adventures in the woods, I follow the trails that were littered in flowers, buzzing with wildlife. The day was fresh in the early morning. The rain had washed away the warm excess of the day before, leaving only a brisk, cool reminder of how summer has ended. And now there was only yellow spotted leaves and an overcast sky. My mind began to wander as I carried myself with a sense of pride, lightly and swiftly. Although I was taking my tea, I felt as if I were a predator, a savage in the wilderness, prone to my instincts alone, as if someone were to say it would be a catch-22. I came to this place to escape civilization, to escape the nuisance of society, only to crawl back to my primitive ways. No language, no social structure, only thoughts. My mind has overstayed its welcome. I have never felt more comfortable. CL, himping up ridges that escalated continuously. I grew dirty. I grew hungry. And I wasn't sure what to do other than to make camp and stay for the night. I have been traveling for many years, staying at wildlife reserves and escaping reality, and I had made an arrangement to stay for the night. I settled down in a site a while off the path, and it was secluded enough for my comfort. The later hours began to crawl fast. I grew restless. I stared straight in the fire. The smoke had made me calm and light-headed. The atmosphere was thin, with a cool nip in the air. The sound of silence engulfed my entire presence, as the crickets and frogs owned the night, and suddenly I was proven wrong. I stood up and inhaled deeply, the cold freezing my body's core temperature, and my spine began to shiver like never before. While reaching for one of my bags, I looked around at what I could see was my camping site. The darkness and slight fog had made my sight shorter than expected. I heard what was expected to be an animal in the woods. I didn't shake or grow worried. I pulled out what I was looking for, my bag of tobacco and rolling papers. I lit a cigarette and searched my pockets for my box of matches and slid it open. As soon as I reached in for one and shut the box closed, I was startled by the noise of soft rustling behind me. Not far enough to think it was something else, and to close for comfort. My mind rattled for a moment, searching quickly and effortlessly for the first thing to cross my mind, a weapon or tool to protect myself from whatever is passing by. I light my cigarette and began to search. Quietly, I looked to my right, scanning the area for whatever I could use, and just as I found what appeared to be a strong piece of wood in the shape of a club, I heard a branch on one of the trees breaking, and no impact of something below. I inhaled my cigarette and patiently waited for my stalker to appear. I didn't think anything was going to happen. Anyway, I have an overreactive imagination. I remember from a long time ago, when I was a little girl, growing up on a farm, no neighbors or anyone to talk to. My parents left me alone most of the time from the very start of it, always busy with something more concerning than myself. But it's quite selfish to feel that way. I would run wild through the woods, as my plot of land had been a little shy of 10 acres. I've grown accustomed to surviving and protecting myself. Reading the woods like an open book, I've climbed more trees and studied the wildlife as it were the most beautiful thing to ever pique my interest. My memory had been bleak and vague, as nothing of extreme terror or turmoil has ever seemed to imprint my soft rain until a brisk autumn morning walk through the woods. I was breaking the age of 15, rebellious as all get out, skipping school to hide out. Both of my parents were never around, so why not do something I enjoy while climbing a tree? I sat upon a thick enough branch to rest and pulled out my cigarettes. I placed it in my mouth and reached for my lighter. As I was about to light a cigarette, I peered up from my focus, and to my surprise I was not alone. In the distance was a creature that was disturbing. Not once in my life had I been so terrified. The thing was tall, no human being, standing with posture that no animal could. A shroud of black covered its entire body, no shape or limbs to identify. I smoked my cigarette, possibly trying to ignore the creature, but it stared at me. No distractions besides the cool air. I blinked several times, confused, trying to understand why it is I am being watched. I exhaled, and I looked away for a slight second, to only find that it had disappeared. I had been visited by a presence that could not be described. I grew worried, so I looked at my watch. The smoke lifted from my cigarette into the murky black that Washington S above me into nothing, and then there it was, green eyes that were as luminous and full as the stars. Of course, I couldn't see around it, or to classify it as something else, as being stalked by the killer, and I was the prey. I reached for the club, grasping it with all my might. My body rose, my feet moved. I abandoned my things as if my body had a mind of I. T-zone, I was terrified to be greeted by the being. Climbing the twisting trails, I felt nothing inside of me but the only thing I knew how to do, survive. The cold air dried my eyes, making the M sore and red, and the atmosphere felt thin. I was questioning my chance of survival, especially when I had traveled a distance to finally end up bumping and falling face first into the ground. My hand wiped the dirt that accumulated on my face. I sobbed loudly with no care, and there the presence was, towering over me with its one-way mirror eyes, no protrusions from it. Body, limbs were no part of it. It acted as if we could communicate through telepathy. The inside of my head was raging like a mad bull. A piercingly loud ringing pulsed throughout my brain. The only way I dealt with it was to clench my fists and scream, finding the strength inside me to find power to put myself on my feet was such a struggle that before I could even sort out anything that was happening, the breathing from this creature had already stolen my will. In astonishment, the creature had bent over. The only way to describe it would to be animated, and how utterly distinctive the smell that wafted off its shell was putrid. It examined me all over as I shook with fear. No way out. I slung the club over my head and shut my eyes. I opened them to only find that the creature had disappeared. I was alone. I sobbed for a minute on the trail, and then I sat up, pulled out my tobacco. While tears ran down my face, I rolled a cigarette and pushed myself to camp. That night I didn't dream. Dawn came fast as I rose from my sleeping bag, reaching for my mess kit and my rolling tobacco. The chirping of the birds were a sweet reminder that I have been saved by the day. Wearing only a tee and underwear, I grabbed my pants and slide into them. I pull my hair back and light the cigarette. Unzipping the tent was always a hassle, and I stepped out, sun beating on my pale skin, and the smell of charred fire from the night before. I smoked my cigarette, inhaling like my life depended on it. I collected all my things and began walking on the trail again. I reached a point on the trail that was narrow and had a huge slope to reservoir below. I sat on the edge. As the wind blew through my hair, I felt safe, but at the on time, the events that happened last night were so unrealistic that I made believe they were a dream. There had to have been an explanation. I remembered the piercing nose the creature created, blaring through my brain. Just remembering can recreate the nose. My subconscious had played the noise on repeat, and I hung my head and shrieked. Losing my balance and sanity, I slipped off the ledge. Smacking into the slope on the cliff. Falling from so high feels like forever, and slow motion matter of fact. As I fell from the cliff, I looked up from where I was sitting and I noticed something that wasn't there before. The creature, with its green eyes peering over the cliff it had watched me fall off of. I closed my eyes, and the splash of water around me engulfed me, comforting me and swaying me like I was its child, and I sank to the bottom to lose my consciousness. Greater men have fallen to worse problems than I. The waters are high, the time is nigh. Story 5. The Wraith. The murky fog made it difficult to see where the forest ends and the road starts. It was late dusk, but the tree-lined road had trees whose branches sheltered the road from any sunlight. Twilight was soon approaching, so the walk became darker and darker. To the left of me was a forest, and to the right was even more forest. The trees were so close together you couldn't see anything, only black shadows. As I walked along that long and lonesome road, I kept my mind blank and tried not to creep myself out. I looked up at the canopy above me, and to the left and the right. Oh, F me, I really am surrounded by trees, I thought. That one narrow road in the center of an intimidating forest was probably used by travelers, strolling players, and traders wandering from one market or village to another. Or maybe the road was used by cunning highwaymen gunning down their victim to either take their money and goods or their lives. I tried to keep my mind blank to drown out the whispers of the trees enclosed on me. Imagine all the secrets those trees knew, every secret about every person who strolled down that road. If trees could talk, would they tell us everything, or remain quiet as they did now? Would they tell us about all the events that happened there that they have witnessed? The mercenaries, highwaymen, and robbers who murdered all of the travelers, strolling players, and tradesmen were forever watched by the surrounding eyes of the tightly packed trees. There were murders on this road, I thought, and this very spot where I am walking. Oh, stop it. I was starting to scare myself. I listened around. There was no wind. No birds, no crickets. Why is it so quiet? No noise. It was just me, the surrounding forest, and my thought. I had forgotten about the murky fog I was in. It had become even denser. Quickly became almost too thick to see through. I couldn't feel any wind, but the bushes and branches behind me were rustling. I quickened my pace. The forest seemed to go on forever. Every tree was identical, and the rustling followed me like a creature running through the bushes. I couldn't understand how the bushes would rustle without the wind. Is something following me, or someone? I flinched as a huge branch suddenly snapped and echoed through the forest. It rang in my ears, and I immediately stopped. Paid in my tracks, I stood there frozen to the spot. I did not move a muscle, and I could feel my heart pounding so loudly. I strained my ears to listen for any movement behind me. I sensed the essence behind me. Someone was following me. I started walking subconsciously. I pressed on in a straight line and quickened my pace. They quickened. I slowed down to hear their footsteps, but I sped up. I panicked. I ran down the pitch dark road. I ran between the forests either side of me. I ran over the cobbles of the road, which hurt my feet as I sprinted without thinking. I didn't want to think. I didn't want to turn around. I knew I would freeze if I saw somebody behind me. I was exhausted and couldn't even tell where my feet were going. I slowed down slightly, but tripped on a loose cobble lying upright on the road. I fell to the ground and smashed my right elbow on the cobbled ground. I cursed my clumsiness. The road was damp from the fog and cold to the touch. I sat up and examined my elbow as much as I could. It was dark, so I tried to make my eyes see more clearly, but failed. My elbow was throbbing with pain, and for a few moments I forgot about the follower. As I stood up, I searched for any figures. There was no one here. I either outran them or I imagined it. I took 2 steps back and bumped into what looked like a signpost made of extremely old, rotten wood. I couldn't make out what some of it said at first, but what I could make out said the old mill. A mill, excellent human beings, or at least a safe place to be. I could just stay there till dawn. Surely it wasn't a long way off. I thought I had walked down that road for hours. I looked up at the sign. It pointed diagonally through the forest. At first I thought somebody may have bumped it to point away from the road, but then as I followed where it was pointing, I saw there was a path buried and entrapped by thorns, nettles, and bushes. It must have been a shortcut or a walker's trail. I didn't know whether to follow the road onwards or risk getting hurt by thorns and nettles and follow the trail to the safety of a mill. I thought it over for a minute. Still held facing the horizon of the road, I was about to leave and follow the cobbled road onwards when a dark shadow loomed over me. I saw it appear on the floor in front of me. I could sense that someone was behind me. No, it didn't feel like someone. I thought it didn't feel human. I just stood there, frozen, staring at the shadow that did not belong to me. A fog-like smoke floated around my feet, clearly visible through the previous fog. In only a short amount of time did it completely cover my feet and the strange shadow. I could still sense that something was behind me. If it wanted to kill me, wouldn't it have done so already? I thought. So I inhaled a big breath and swung around sharply to see what was behind me. There was nothing here, no person, no killer, no inhuman monster out to get me. My eyes searched my surroundings looking for anything at all. I felt so happy I smiled. I turned and looked at the trees next to the signpost. I was trying to see through the trees as far as I could, but it was just darkness. A sudden chill flew through the air which wiped the grin off my face as fast as a pendulum swung. I was still staring through the darkness between the trees when, I don't know what, but a shadowy, smoky, demonic face came hurtling towards me. The face felt as if it literally went through me, and I screamed as I saw my fears before my eyes. The impact threw me onto the floor. I sat there dazed and petrified as I pulled myself together, struggled and scurried to get up, and ran as fast as I could through the thorn-entrapped trail heading towards the mill. I have never run so fast in my life. I just kept running. The fears and the face were still burned into my mind. My legs were being scratched, and my trousers were ripped in many places. I was bleeding everywhere. As I ran through the forest following the trail, I ran up and over a small hill. As my eyes adjusted to light there, it was the old mill. I'm nearly there, I thought. Come on. The nettles and thorns disappeared, and the forest floor turned into soft grass. I was in open air, no forest, just an old mill. I still pictured that demonic face. I was still petrified. I could still hear rustling in the forest. Maybe that face was following me again, I thought. No, not again. I finally reached the mill. I stammered to open the huge barn doors. I pulled up the heavy wooden bolt, opened the door, and raced in. I walked away from the door backwards. Nothing is going to hurt me here, I thought. I am safe. My heart was pounding so loudly I thought it would explode. I heard a low rumbling behind me. I slowly and hesitantly turned around. A huge, strange shadow emerged from under the door. It glided slowly towards me. I stepped backwards against the wall. There was nowhere to go. It came closer and closer and closer. It was like nothing I ever saw. I was cornered, trapped. The shadow was at my feet now. It sucked itself up through my legs. It froze me to the spot. Tears were running down my face as it made its way up through my body. It felt like it was sucking everything out of me. The pain was excruciating and bearable. I could feel the shadow flowing through my veins, but felt like sharp knives instead of an untouchable shadow. The monster flowed up through my blood-stained legs, through my hips, through my torso. My heart stopped. No heart beat. It made its way up my neck and into my skull. As it hit my brain, it felt like it was sucking all the life out of me. It floated out of the top of my head, and as the last inch of the shadow left my body, I fell to the ground. Nothing, no heartbeat, no life, no warmth, no soul. That's what it does, Wraith. It takes multiple forms to manipulate its victims, but it's commonly seen in its shadow form, either as a stalking shadow upon the ground or a rotting corpse in the guise of a shadow. The Wraith does not know the meaning of mercy. By causing unbearable pain, it sucks the soul out of your body, and your body disappears into the ground. The Wraith takes your body to feast on in the underworld. All that is left is your shadow imprinted into the ground permanently. Story 6. Ordinary nights, dusk will find me in fits. A pinching feeling of dread washes over me as my eyes sweep across this room. Soft, low lights etch out details of a crew of sweet, stuffed animals entrusted with the task of keeping watch over me as I sleep. The purity and nostalgia they represent are to serve as comfort so that I can drift away into slumber nary a care. My gaze then shifts beyond my bed and toward my bedroom door that is open wide, inviting the lamplight from the living room as well. I have done all that I know how to incorporate as much soothing light to illuminate the very dark corners that could harbor secrets in this heavy black night air. If I bring everything that could be hidden to the light, then there will be no occasion for surprise, and I will surely be safe. And I know this to be true. I know I am safe, that nothing I fear is reality. There isn't such hogwash as the boogeyman, and truly young adults should no longer fear such ridiculous fables. The things that go bump in the night are nothing more than a collection of what children fear the most. I am an odious child. By that logic, I am showing myself to be, oh, so very pathetic. I pay rent here. I own this room. I didn't invite anyone else to stay the night. Therefore, I know that I am alone. I am safe, and now I choose to close my eyes and go to sleep. When I wake up, I shall roll out of bed and carry out a brand new day, whilst feeling the sting of quiet humiliation as sunlight replaces the need for night lights and outshines the wimpy light that these 60-watt bulbs give off, just as last night and the night before. But all I am doing this to keep her away from he always, and I have done all I can do. So by the time I am done saying good night to each member of my plush army, I will be sound asleep. My eyelids flutter open, and my chest dips as if it caved in. I cannot inhale as easily as I could upon achieving slumber. My mind fumbles grudgingly, spinning out of urgency, out of panic. Get up. I try to whisper. I hope to rouse myself into action, calming myself and settling into a new position, for I am sure that I am simply recovering from a nightmare. But my body continues to lie still, and my voice lurks trapped still within my throat. Get up, I attempt to plead. I cannot turn my head. My shoulders are pinned heavily to this mattress. I am wide awake. My heart quickens itself, ready to flee in search of safety. I can see my bedroom door still open. The door has not moved at all, and nothing has been touched. I know the effort to be futile, so I attempt to shut my eyes and wait for this nightmare to pass, because that's what is happening. It's just my mind playing tricks, and nothing more than that. I shut my eyes in search of calm and rest. But, alas, they cannot be found. I cannot breathe my heart is rallying against its confinement in this rib cage. I am certain that my chest wall may explode from all the pressure. I can feel the weight bear down further and further still. Mocking me, she SDS gleefully in her folklore. But I am very familiar with her presence. The hag comes to visit at the worst of times, an unwelcome acquaintance sharing my bed and stealing precious moments where I cowl, deeply sleeping if I weren't fighting for control of my mind while silently begging for freedom to move about on my own free will. I desperately attempt to move the right side of my hip or force my right shoulder to rise as the weight intensifies. I blink as hot tears of agony stream steadily down the corners of my eyes. Shadows dance in the corners, a taunting marionette where the light cannot tread. I hear steady breathing against my own. Shallow gasps. I become dizzy, and the room begins to twirl. Did my sheets just hiss? My body is frozen, stiff, and it is no longer mine. The hag has settled in to pay me a visit again. This sickening void of terror and isolation is the gift that she comes bearing. For no one will ever be able to grasp what I am going through. Most people cannot and will not ever believe that something so strange can ever truly happen. The back of my skull digs further into the pillow, and my neck constricts to that my belabored breathing becomes even more difficult. I try desperately to let out even just one sound, a single sound, can then lead the way for the smallest of movement. If one or the other can be achieved, then I can free myself from the spell, and I can then return to safety. The clock records what an onlooker would judge only to be a young woman fast asleep in her bed. The rhythm taps out the minutes that hide away from me as nothing happens. Nothing has eyes, all on me, as the hag lets her chin rest atop mine like a jilted lover who has come to visit in the shadows the night affords. We share the breath, nose touching mine, eyes preying upon my deepest thoughts and ripping my soul to shreds. These tears are an offering unto her. Soon, if I am lucky, the salty liquid will dampen my hair and loose the bond that my head has entered packed with my bed sheets, upholding an agreement that the rest of me did not ever recall striking. The hag shakily cups her hands gently behind my neck slither upward, taking gentle hold of my head. Her hands offer no comfort that human contact would give. There is no reassurance in this all-consuming grasp. These familiar eyes gazing into my own are a most hideous sight, as a child of nothing cannot contain a soul. All warmth is gone as I peer into those blackened and vacant orbs, the birthplace of my nightmares. My body begins to fall completely numb, and a crooked, unnatural, otherworldly grin spreads deliberately across the hag's face, just as all other times before. If I only understood what she wanted, I'd give her absolutely anything if it meant she would never come and visit me again. She curls her feet underneath her pelvis, pushing down on my stomach and causing my diaphragm to constrict. All hope fades away. Those listless, ravenous eyes recognize something in mine, something they desperately long for. her pitted and rotting cheeks moving closer to mine. My nose fills with the stench of musty earth and decaying flesh, head tilting and neck cracking in twisting and jerking motions. Lacking the fluidity of those of the land of the living, she attempts my deepest horrors realize right then to hold on to me in search of what she so greedily seeks. One simple kiss, solidifying my exit from this life and sinking instead to the oddly tempting promise of nothing. One simple night in which nothing can belong with someone. Frenetically I keep demanding, over and over, of my right shoulder to buck her off of my torso, push her away, break her captivating embrace, her hypnotizing, awful intent. Such inhuman strength, an eerily tantalizing thought of just giving up and agreeing to stay because why keep fighting, could suggest that I will never be free so long as this oppressive darkness ensues. But this has happened in times past, and I know if I just want it badly enough I can end what is sure to happen. Suddenly space and time rip apart from each other, flashes of light strike and fill my vision, and the powerful force behind it quakes, consuming my entire body. The shriek that had been held back for now several hours finally releases itself. All that exists is that silent scream, now given its brief chance to speak. The only thing that can be heard is weak and shrill, but it is just enough to bring me back from the throne room to nowhere and slam me back into my own bed. My right shoulder moves ever so slightly from its position, and I escape from under this weight. The hag will not have me tonight for 37 a.m. and I am free. I shudder as I wail. These nights occur often, and without mercy. I cast a glance at my little army of teddy bears and other stuffed animals. I lean against them as my eyes continue relentlessly leaking. My body is racked with sobs as I know there exists not a single person who can help me. There is not a person, pill, or potion in this woe world who can make all the nights filled with fear of never returning from nowhere, and all who can know of the confusion, terror, and wonder of what happens is no one at all. The phenomena that CA uses these sensations and visualizations is called sleep paralysis, a commonly misunderstood event that mainly occurs at least once in a person's life. However, due to my own neurological complications, I experience sleep paralysis very frequently and go months having ordinary nights such as this, and oftentimes opt to choose not to sleep at all, which has induced a typical psychosis from sleep deprivation in the past. There is no treatment for this or any form of sleep paralysis. The experience detailed uses descriptive language for interest. The account itself is 100% authentic. Story 7. My son is addicted to time control. He may not know it, but my son is in extreme mortal danger. With every passing minute, the odds dwindle that I will ever see him alive again. I should have been a better parent. I had too much faith in him. We haven't always been close, and we used to fight a lot. I know he secretly resents me for divorcing his addict mother on the rare occasion when she actually shows up to her weekly visits to see him. He tells me to leave and listens intently to her mad ramblings, as if just to spite me. Despite how many times I have told him that I only do things for him because I love him and want what is best for him, he refuses to consider me as anything more than a roommate who pays for his expenses. He has a short temper and is very rebellious. Despite his age, this brings me to our latest problem, one that could prove fatal for him. You probably all know about time control by now, but for those of you who have not kept up to date on current events, I will describe the recent past through my point of view. As you may remember, it was just 1 year ago when the research company Hastel announced its revolutionary breakthrough of time manipulation. I remember laughing at that headline, thinking that it was some ridiculous hoax that some unfortunate news reporter happened to fall for. But as I saw the footage of the LD's first time traveler in action, I realized that the world would never be the same again. At that point, time machines were too large for practical use. A machine larger than a house was needed to slow down time for a small lab mouse for less than 5 minutes. Still, the world watched in awe as the mouse moved at supersonic speeds through a series of mazes, though many had initially believed that the creature had gained some sort of supernatural ability. The scientists in charge of the public experiment promptly explained that the mouse was not actually moving faster and normal, but that because of the machine towering above it, time had become slower within the maze. What had seemed like minutes to us was actually almost an hour to the mouse. Scientific communities from across the globe celebrated the historic breakthrough, but Hastel was preparing for a more lucrative future. Despite the limitations of the early models, I suspected from the start that it would not be long before Hastel had developed a sleeker and more marketable version of the device for public use. 2 months after the initial breakthrough, commercials bombarded the world about the new time pack, the machine that had once filled several Lincoln research rooms and weighed almost a ton could now fit into a large backpack that almost anyone could carry. Instead of youths, people could freeze the world around them for hours at a time, despite a price tag so high that only the most wealthy people could afford one. The time pack was a huge commercial success. People began completing projects in hours that would typically take days to finish. Fewer people complained about sleep deprivation and time-constrained work schedules. Many people even abandoned their cars, opting to walk everywhere they went as time had become virtually irrelevant to them. As sales increased, newer, lighter, and cheaper versions of the time pack were developed. It was not long before millions of units had been sold. With time packs, everyone seemed happier. They finally had all the time they could ever want. However, as it often accompanies great technology, vile minds and evil hands had turned the technology to favor their dark agendas. Police officers were promptly equipped with time packs as thieves, and serial killers began committing their crimes at speeds that made them virtually invisible to the human eye. Drug lords could create and distribute their substances in the blink of an eye. Forensic scientists became overwhelmed as they were presented with more and more criminal evidence that dated back centuries. As things got worse, Hastel realized the dangerous power of its devices and began requiring licenses and background checks from its customers, but it was too late. More stories flooded then about high-ranking officials being assassinated by ordinary, disgruntled people. There are even rumors that in less developed countries, people are forced to use time packs to contribute an entire lifetime's worth of work in a matter of days. leaving entire villages destitute save for an incredible number of elderly people. The greatest blow to Hastel's reputation did not become public until recently, however. You all have likely heard of Randy Hill. He was a 9-year-old boy who had received a time pack as a birthday gift. By nightfall, Randy had vanished. Over the following few days, the worried parents reported 3 break-ins, 1 by a teenager, and 2 more by adult men. By the 3rd day, Randy's body was found lying on his bed in advanced stages of decomposition. Forensic evidence suggested that not only was the body over 100 years old, but that young Randy had died from old age. He had lived his entire life in just 3 days. His body would have been nothing to dust if the batteries in his time pack didn't run dry. But you all have likely already heard most of those stories. What you didn't know is that just last week, my son got a time pack of his own. He got it from his mother during one of the few visits that she is allowed. That drunk has lost all sense of responsibility for our child, and it showed when she used her inheritance to buy my son a brand new time pack with no thought as to his well-being. He is, or at least he was, 11 years old, so I didn't confiscate it from him. But I made him promise me that he would treat it with a kind of respect and restraint, that he would show a firearm, and as long as he promised to only use it to do homework. And fortunately, but expectedly, over the past few days I have seen him less and less. He would often startle me by walking into one room, only to walk out of a completely different one. Moments later, I knew he was having fun, but I feared that he might have been using his new toy too much. My fear was confirmed yesterday. I remember the morning clearly because as I reached the kitchen to prepare breakfast, I saw my son making pancakes. The first thing I noticed was how different he looked. Have you ever reunited with someone that you haven't seen in such a long time that it takes you a while to recognize them? That is how I felt when I saw him. He still looked like a kid, but just a little older. I also realized I had never taught him how to make pancakes. I sat down and talked with him about what he had been up to the night before. Straining to remember, he recounted that when he had gone to bed, he forgot to turn off his time pack. When he woke up, fully rested, he realized that it was still night and that only a few seconds had gone by. He was not tired anymore and figured that he would spend the rest of the night reading his books. As he reached for the off switch on his time pack, he realized that if he just kept it on, he could read an entire library of books and do just about anything else he wanted in just one night. He then told me about how he spent days switching between reading, watching cartoons, eating, and sleeping. After a while, he got bored of the routine and the darkness of the night, and finally turned the time pack off. The pancakes he had made that morning he had actually learned from a cookbook and had perfected as they had been his snack of choice the night before. I realized then that it had gone too far. I didn't care about how much he enjoyed stopping time. He had to put an end to his bad habit or risk losing some of his most precious years. I sternly told him that he had to stop, and I demanded the time pack. However, he refused, and after a short but heated argument, he turned it on and disappeared. That was yesterday. I have not seen or heard from him since. See that argument, and I fear he has not turned off his time back in all that time, I now realize what a terrible mistake I have made. I never taught my son about discipline, self-control, self-dependence, or the importance of getting an education. I don't know where he is or how much time has passed for him. I do think that he will come to his senses eventually, but time is Rooney. In Giat, will he be a 50-year-old man before I see him again? I can't believe I am saying this, but I wish that he had just decided to run away months ago, before he ever got his time pack at Al East. Then he would have his whole life ahead of him. If there is anything you know that can help, please let me know. I read online about a rehab program for people who are addicted to time control, but I think it's too late for that. Call me as soon as possible with any ideas. I can't think of anything else I can really do. What makes me most nervous is that it's an exceptionally beautiful day outside. I can imagine someone spending all of eternity out there.